Mark, it's been a while since we've podcasted together.
It's been ages. It's been that sort of funny summer season where you expect it's going to be quiet, but obviously it hasn't been quiet. You've been off in Alaska, lucky you.
I know, yeah, I managed to squeeze in a little bit of sightseeing. But more importantly, I've not spoken to you since you got back from your holiday.
Yeah.
How was it?
I had a great time. What is the best part of America? The best thing about America, do you reckon?
The national parks.
100%. Yeah, it is. And I went to Utah with the family. And I've got young kids,
nice.
and we rented an RV, as they call them here, a camper van. We drove around Utah, and it was absolutely spectacular. So I really recommend it. Arches National Park, Canyonlands National Park. It was a Dead Horse State Park. All these places, absolutely stunning. Cowboy country. We loved it.
It really is beautiful, isn't it, Utah? I've not been to Arches, but I went to Zion, and just those red rust mountains.
Yeah.
You feel like you're almost on another planet.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. My faith in America, if it was ever in doubt, and all its wonder, was definitely restored over the past few weeks. Anyway, I'm Mark Stone.
I'm Martha Kelner.
And on today's episode, it has been a very busy couple of weeks. I got back just on Monday. It felt like 0 to 60 in about 20 seconds. Goodness me. Busier for you, Martha, than it has been for me. And for James, it's been busy too. Lots of you have sent us lots of questions. We haven't done a Q&A episode for a little while, so we thought we would do one.
Yeah, thank you for sending all your questions in as ever, and keep them coming. Firstly, Joseph has emailed in all the way from Nigeria. Thank you very much for listening. What does Joseph want to know, Mark?
Yes, Joseph wants to know what are Trump's latest comments after meeting with both Putin and then Zelensky over the past week or so. Is he leaning more towards Russia or to Ukraine's rhetoric? And a follow-up question, he's asking, is there any law in the US that forbids a sitting president of the United States from reducing or totally withdrawing from the state's world policing efforts? Two really good questions there. And on the first one, and what do you think, Martha? It's extremely hard to know where Trump is on a certain issue from day to day. I felt that actually back in the UK. I was back in the UK a few weeks ago, and everyone wanted to know from me what I thought of what Trump was doing, what I thought his thinking was, and it's so hard, isn't it?
Yeah, I think after seeing Alaska and the greeting for President Putin there, you know, this big red carpet welcome, the fly past, the round of applause, I think concern around the world, and especially for Zelensky and other European leaders, was that Trump was siding with Putin's narrative about the war in Ukraine. We've known for a long time that Trump kind of holds both Putin and Zelensky responsible for the situation in Ukraine. You know, he talks about everybody being to blame, kind of ignoring the fact that, you know, this was a sovereign nation that was invaded.
Mostly it's Biden that's to blame, isn't it?
Exactly. And, you know, there was very little evidence on the basis of the warm relations with Putin that he had during that Alaska meeting, you know, saying it's good to see old faces and, you know, letting him dictate who speaks first in the news conference. Very little evidence that he'd shifted in his opinion, that, you know, there was shared responsibility for this. And I think that's why European leaders were so keen to get to DC on Monday, to be seen publicly to support Zelensky. And also this feeling that Donald Trump often sides with the last person who was in his ear. They all wanted to be there. And that's why there was this historic, you know, huge presence of European leaders in the Oval Office. And I think it did have an effect. I think Zelensky seemed to be way better drilled than he was in his first visit to the Oval Office in February. And I think it may have changed Donald Trump's thinking on things. You know, Putin was trying to cast Zelensky as being the obstacle to peace in Ukraine. I think Trump now coming round to the idea that Putin is in fact the obstacle to peace. And yesterday, you know, Donald Trump seemed to suggest that there was a justification for Ukraine to be on the offensive in Russia. He posted on Truth Social saying it's very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sports that has a fantastic defence, he said, but is not allowed to play offence, an American term there. There is no chance of winning, he said. It's like that with Ukraine and Russia. So I think there is a slight, you know, reason for optimism for Ukraine, in that Trump seems to be, I think, at the moment, siding with Zelensky, although that can all change on the flip of a coin.
It really can, and that post was kind of like came out of nowhere, but it certainly suggests that today, at least, he is very much of the view that he needs to be hard on Putin. Although remember that as part of the whole process that brought Putin to Alaska, the whole idea of sanctions against Putin and further sanctions have kind of gone away. And I think Trump is now in a position where he knows that if he wants to bring Putin to the table, he can't be imposing more sanctions on him, because that's going to push him further away from the negotiating table. So if you're sitting in the Kremlin, if you are Putin, I think you think maybe you are actually in a better place now than you were. So it's kind of some very strange diplomacy that is going on. Right after he posted what you've just read, another post from him on Truth Social, with a picture of him and of Putin, the one in Alaska, and next to it and with it, the 1959 photograph, Nixon confronting then Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. That image of Nixon and Khrushchev became kind of a symbol of the United States standing up to the Soviet Union. So the photo that he's chosen of he and Putin is him kind of jabbing Putin with the finger. And it's kind of similar to the one of the old Soviet leader and Richard Nixon. So the image he's trying to portray there is that he is the strong man and he is telling Putin what he needs to do. But the reality is, from what we have heard out of the Kremlin over the past 48 hours, is that they have no interest in peace. The Sergei Lavrov, the wily foreign minister of Vladimir Putin, effectively saying, look, we're not interested in these European security guarantees, completely undermining everything that was discussed on Monday, and frankly making Trump look very weak indeed.
On to Joseph's second question, leads on from that, about whether Donald Trump is compelled by law to maintain world policing efforts. Well, firstly, there isn't anything in the US Constitution that stops a president from being more or less interventionist, apart from the fact that Congress has to approve various decisions, such as the US going to war. That is in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. I may or may not have had to look that up. Also, there is no formal world police, as Joseph puts it. That being said, Donald Trump has been more interventionist than he said he would be. He campaigned on ending US involvement in foreign wars. Well, he now seems to be acting as world police chief, if you like, in all but name. You know, he's set his sights, we know this, on the Nobel Peace Prize. He is irked by the fact that Barack Obama has won it and he hasn't. Interestingly, he seems to have his sights set even higher now. He did an interview with Fox News this week, and he said, I want to try and get to heaven.
I saw that.
Yeah, Nobel Peace Prize not good enough. He wants the Golden Gates.
Well, losing Russian and Ukrainian, mostly soldiers, some people as missiles hit wrong spots or get lobbed into cities like Kiev and towns. But, if I can save 7,000 people a week from being killed, I think that's I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole. But if I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons.
Part of this quest to get to heaven now seems to be about solving global conflicts, and being the superintendent of the world police is all part of this. You know, he's been boasting for a long time about the fact that he's solved 6 wars in his first 6 months in office. He's now saying it's 7. He's talking about Armenia and Azerbaijan, Serbia and Kosovo, Cambodia, Thailand, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, India and Pakistan, of course, and Iran and Israel. And to be fair to Donald Trump, he has had some solid wins here. Pakistan, we know, nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. They said he'd been key in resolving that conflict. India, on the other hand, said he didn't have much to do with it. Serbia and Kosovo, to take that for an example, not sure whether they were actually going to war, but Trump said he prevented new violence from breaking out there. Egypt and Ethiopia, there's actually no deal there. But with Thailand and Cambodia and Israel, Iran, ceasefires have held, and Donald Trump did play a role in bringing those about. Interestingly, when he came into office, he said that he thought Ukraine and Russia would be the easiest conflict to solve. Don't know quite what gave him that impression. And there is no real evidence that Russia is shifting on its aim to take over not just the part of Ukraine that it's already invading, but the whole of Ukraine. Now, on to a huge story domestically, Mark. We've had a question from Tony. He asks, what's it like being in Washington, D.C. right now with the National Guard on the streets? And is it having an impact on your everyday life?
Yeah, it's a spectacle for sure, because when I left DC a few weeks ago, they were not on the streets, and by the time I got back, there's a Humvee armoured vehicle parked outside Union Station, just down the road from our office here. There are other armoured personnel carriers. Some people are saying that there are tanks everywhere. There are no tanks. I think people see these vehicles and think that because they're military things, they look like tanks. There are no tanks on the streets. That is an exaggeration. But there are National Guard and there are some khaki-coloured vehicles around the place. This is troops on the streets in order, on the face of it at least, to improve the crime rate in Washington.
And obviously there are suggestions from Donald Trump's critics that this is all part of an overly aggressive, irresponsible use of his presidential power to pursue his political opponents, to federalise Democrat-run cities. And to that end, you might remember, or I'm sure people will remember, that the National Guard were deployed onto the streets of Los Angeles, 4,000 of them alongside 700 Marines. That was in response to Donald Trump's immigration policy. And the Democrat mayor of the city, Karen Bass, said it only served to inflame tensions. Almost all of those troops have now been released, although 300 troops do remain on the streets of LA. Donald Trump wants to extend their mission, wants more federal involvement in the running of Los Angeles in the lead up to the 2028 Olympic Games too. So I think DC and LA are the starting point. I think we'll see Donald Trump increase his efforts to put National Guard on the streets elsewhere as well.
Yeah, there's another side to this as well. I mean, there are two things going on here. A, he wants to improve crime in the crime rate and sort out the crime problem in Washington and in other cities. But which is laudable, but you have to question the abilities of the National Guard to do that. I mean, experts say military are not going to be able long term to improve a crime problem in a particular city, although optically you can see how it might look all powerful. The other thing that's happening, of course, alongside the attempts to sort out the crime problem is ICE raids are still going on. That is these raids to round up illegals, quote unquote. Some of them maybe, some of them maybe not. They are sort of swept up in this sort of catch-all policy, and that's happening a lot in Washington as well. So two things going on in parallel here. But the other thing I want to mention, Martha, is that as you might expect, some governors of other Republican states across the country, to curry favour with the president, are offering their own National Guard. So each state in America has a National Guard at the disposal of the governor. And some of these states are sending their National Guard to Washington to help out. Now, the irony here is that some of the cities there are some cities in those states which have a much worse crime problem than Washington, D.C. Jackson, Mississippi, for example. I've been there a couple of times. An incredibly poor city in the south of Mississippi. Has a really, really bad crime problem, far worse than Washington. And yet the Mississippi National Guard is not on the streets of Jackson. They're on the streets, oddly, of Washington, D.C.
Curious.
Anyway, moving on. Lizzie from Sydney, Australia, has emailed in. Thank you for listening, Lizzie. She asks, what is a grand jury? I've heard the word bandied around a lot in regard to the Epstein files, but I don't really know what a grand jury is. Martha?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question and a prescient one, Lizzie, because as we're because just yesterday, a federal judge in New York denied the Justice Department's request to unseal grand jury transcripts and exhibits in the Jeffrey Epstein case. So this is very much in the news. And how juries work here in America, the legal and court system in the US is very different to the UK. Here we have two types of juries, both trial juries and grand juries. Trial juries are what you imagine when you see a jury in a film or jury service. Grand juries are very different. You have more jurors, up to 23 people sit on a grand jury, and you don't do just one case. You hear multiple cases over the course of 18 months, whereas trial juries classically sit every day. Grand juries sometimes meet once or twice a week. And crucially, a grand jury is not there to decide if someone is innocent or guilty. This is a private proceeding. It's often used for white-collar crime. And the jury listens to a prosecutor who presents the evidence and then decides if there is probable cause for someone to be charged with a crime. If they decide there is probable cause, then a trial will happen. In a grand jury, the prosecutor runs the show, and it's down to them to prove that there's enough evidence for the grand jury to decide on a trial. And you need to have a grand jury sit to consider every federal felony, so felony being the most serious type of crime, unless the defendant waives the right to have one, and then you go straight to a trial jury.
Yes, so when transcripts from a grand jury are unsealed, what that means is that these private files that were put forward by the prosecutor as evidence for a trial to either happen or not happen, depending on what the jury decide, those files, those private files that the grand jury saw, they become public. So it's an unusual thing to do. And if we take the latest developments in the Epstein saga, the district judge denying the Department of Justice from unsealing the grand jury transcripts from the Epstein case, that means that the judge decided that the Department of Justice had not cleared a high enough bar required to justify making this unusual decision to release the private grand jury information into the public domain. The judge said that's because the Department of Justice already has enough material, some 100,000 pages worth of Epstein files, that they don't need to reveal the 70 or so pages in the Epstein grand jury trial, and that the unsealing of the information would only serve as a distraction, in the judge's words, a diversion. So he has denied the request to unseal that. But you can be sure, Martha, that as with every conspiracy theory, it will rumble on. For many, this will only make them think, there really is something up here.
And it's plaguing Donald Trump and his presidency.
Well, until he changes the subject and makes everyone else look elsewhere. Look at Ukraine. Look at my meeting with Putin. All very convenient, you might say.
Liv has commented below one of our TikToks. Remember, you can get in touch that way. We often say email us at trump100@sky.uk, but feel free to comment under any of the Trump 100 socials. We'll definitely find it. Anyway, Liv has asked Mark, who is Steve Witkoff? I keep hearing about him, she says. He seems to be brokering the most important deals in Israel and Russia.
Well, trying to.
Trying to. I had no idea who he was until a few months ago, Liv says. Has he always been a politician? I'm not sure she's alone in wondering where on earth Witkoff has come from.
Yeah, has he always been a politician? No, and he isn't a politician. He remains. He is not part of the political establishment at all, and perhaps that is why he is so attractive to Donald Trump. His rise to the top of the geopolitical negotiating table has been incredibly quick. In fact, many people who are friends with him, many people who know of him, were very surprised when they suddenly heard that Donald Trump was making him his special envoy. He's kind of the Swiss Army knife, Mr. Fix-It, for Donald Trump, appointed as special envoy to the Middle East, but then asked to solve the Ukraine war as well. And he has, frankly, conspicuously failed on both of those for now. He is trying to make progress. I think it's very fair to say that. But he hasn't made any breakthroughs on those two key challenges because they're so complex. And that many people say he is wholly unqualified, and that's why he's failed.
I've heard him described as naive, Mark. What sense do you get of what people, and especially foreign diplomats, actually think of him?
Well, I think on the Russia file, he has seems to have displayed quite a lot of naivety. But on his other file, on Israel Gaza, diplomats I talk to have actually been really quite impressed with his ability to do things differently. He has managed to get. He hasn't managed to solve it. Absolutely not. Look at Gaza; it's a disaster. So take that, but then behind that, diplomats in the Middle East, Gulf Arab diplomats, do say that his fresh thinking and just doing things in a slightly different way has actually moved the bar just a little bit, or moved the dial, I should say. There's a story of him turning up in Israel a few months ago and wanting to see Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister. And it was a Friday night. It was Shabbat. And so Netanyahu's people said, well, I'm sorry. The Prime Minister's not available. And he said, I don't care. I'm here on behalf of the President. I want to see him now. Steve Witkoff, incidentally, is Jewish. But he said, I'm not interested in the Sabbath. I'm not interested in Shabbat. I'm here to solve this problem. Get Netanyahu. And he came. He pulled him to heel on that occasion. It doesn't seem to be working quite so well now. But he definitely does things very, very differently. But he is not a seasoned diplomat at all. 68 years old, born in the Bronx in New York. He's kind of been part of the mega rich in New York, in the New York set for decades, a property billionaire, golfing buddy of Donald Trump. He was on the golf course in Florida last year with Trump when he faced that second assassination attempt. These two are really, really close friends. They've been friends for 40 years or so. And there's a very good story, Martha, about a young Steve Witkoff stepping in one day at a New York deli to buy Trump his lunch because Trump apparently turned up without his wallet. And Steve Witkoff stepped in and bought him his sandwich. And he's known for being a very hands-on person, something that actually we're seeing displayed now with his geopolitical hat on. He bought up property in very poor parts of New York, did up these properties and then sold them on for a lot more money. And it's said that he used to go around collecting the rent for these properties himself with a handgun strapped to his ankle. So he's worked in some rough parts of New York, but I think he's finding that the challenges of Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, Gaza are really very, very hard indeed.
We've got a question, Mark, from John Hawthorne. He asks us, I would really appreciate your take on the recent furore over Donald Trump allegedly ordering the state of Texas to arrange an early restructure of congressional maps. What does that all mean, and what's happening in California? Because it sounds like the same thing is happening there, but with the Democrats. This is a sticky subject, John, but it goes to the very heart of US elections, fair representation.
Yeah, it's not very easy to understand, but I'll give it a go. It's all related to something called gerrymandering, a political tactic that doesn't exist in countries like the UK. So if you take the UK as an example, in Britain, there is an independent electoral body that looks at the population census, sees where clusters of people have grown or declined, and then draws or redraws the boundaries of constituencies off the back of that. So you often hear, I think we had it quite recently, that new constituencies had popped up because they're looking at where populations are moving, trying to make sure that everything's balanced, and then maybe a new constituency will emerge or a boundary will be redrawn. In the UK, 70,000 or so people are grouped into constituencies, and whoever they vote for at an election becomes that member of parliament representing that group of people. Now, in the US, it's a bit different. Usually, maps are redrawn every 10 years or so, depending on new census data, to make sure that there are around 770,000 people in each federal district. But there's no independent body that draws those maps. They're redrawn as part of an approval process by each state's politicians in their state capital, and that's when they can gerrymander parts of the state. Now, that means that you can irregularly draw your district boundaries to have lots of people from certain parts of the state all clustered together in the same district. So lots of one-party members in one district, or lots of one-party members spread out across districts, which could, of course, be an advantage or a disadvantage for any one party. As long as you can draw a continuous shape for the district, it doesn't matter how odd that shape is, as long as there are 770,000 people inside the redrawn district. And that is what is causing all sorts of controversy right now down in Texas. On the instructions of Trump, they are redrawing the maps actually outside the normal 10-year census cycle to help boost Republicans' chances of winning more seats at the midterms in November 2027. The new map redrawing could give the Republicans an extra 5 seats in the House here in Washington. And clearly, given it is such a tight split in the House at the moment, that would be really advantageous for Donald Trump.
Yeah, and as you might expect, California, a blue state, their governor Gavin Newsom is retaliating, going tit for tat with Trump and Texas Governor Greg Abbott. California's Senate committee has approved redrawing California's state maps to gerrymander in favour of the Democrats. That would boost the Democrat seat wins in this state by 5 seats too. The reality is, the more states that get involved in this fight, the more it benefits the Republicans, just because of how many more people in the city vote for the Democrats. More rural residents generally vote Republican, so Republican states can gerrymander their districts to a greater degree than the Democrats can.
Yeah, so they're both at it. And it seems as though Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, a Democrat, of course, has begun to tweet like Donald Trump as well, in the style of Mr. Trump. Sam from Dublin's asking about that.
Yeah, I think this is a case of if you can't beat them, then join them. Newsom is known for maintaining a high profile. He hosts his own podcast. And in case you've missed it, his tweeting style or his posting style now mimics Donald Trump too. It's also matching him in terms of frequency. So Newsom's Twitter account used to be very traditional, talking of new initiatives in very sober terms. Now it looks like Donald Trump's Truth Social account. Everything's in caps lock. He's calling himself America's favorite governor. He's signing off all his posts saying, "Thank you for your attention to this matter," which is exactly what Trump does. It is actually very funny. It's almost mocking Donald Trump. But I think there is a serious point to it. You know, it's deliberately designed to antagonize in the way that the president's posts are. You know, they're rude, they're dismissive, they're aggressive, and he's doing it because simply the Democrats' way of communicating isn't working. Newsom thinks he needs to get inside the MAGA mindset and to listen to what Trump supporters always say about Donald Trump, and that is that he is not a traditional politician, that he's straight talking, that, you know, he's not directing everything at the liberal elite, and that's why they like him. And Newsom's looking at that and thinking, maybe I can have, you know, a part of that. And if we look at the number of followers of his Twitter account, it's almost doubled in the first 3 weeks of August since he started doing this, you know, so at least he is reaching, you know, a bigger audience, I guess.
Yeah, he is definitely one to watch in the years ahead. Thanks so much for sending in all your questions. As we always say, we love answering them, so keep them coming in.
Yeah, hope you have a lovely weekend. And as a reminder, if you do want to get in touch, you can do so at trump100@sky.uk. And please do remember to follow the podcast wherever you're listening from. Leave us a comment or a review there too, if you can. And we will see you next week.